this is Linda Cohn from ESPN, and you're listening to the ML Sports Platter.
The ML Sports Platter back with you and brought to you by Sit Means Sit Syracuse, Stanley Law Offices, and our great friends at the Allen Angus Pub, home of the best darn Angus burger in town. If you're in and around central New York, stop on by for the best darn Angus burger in town. At Mike L. Sports on Twitter, and of course Mike L. Sports 1979 on Instagram. The ML Sports Platter, part of the Brawl Network, and you can get us on Twitter at Network Brawl and me at Mike L. Sports as well. Super excited to bring him on to the program. He's the founder of SportsLogos.net, and he's got a new book out as well, Fabric of the Game. It's available major bookstores, online where books are sold, and you can get him on Twitter at SportsLogosNet, a must-follow on Twitter, at SportsLogosNet. He's terrific. Chris Creamer, welcome back, man. How are you?
Thanks, Mike. I really appreciate being on your show again. I look back on some of your past episodes, and I see some of the guests you get. I can't believe that I am of that caliber that you would reach out to me for 2 shows, but I really appreciate it. It's an honor.
Well, look, I appreciate the kind words, and you're right there with all of them, and this is a podcast for the masses, for everyone, all sports. It's kind of where I put together the name Platter after I had left, corporate radio, kind of trying to encompass one of the things people think that I know a lot. I have a variety of sports knowledge. I said, well, let's just throw it all on a platter, ML Sports Platter. So I threw it here, and we know sports, obviously, a big part of the games. It's the logos. It's the fabric of the game, the stories behind the NHL's names, logos, and uniforms. Your book is out. What's the message here that you're trying to get across in this book, A, and B, how did it all come to fruition here, Chris?
Well, what I wanted to do when writing this book was I wanted to see, okay, so as someone who's been covering logo and name unveiling for 20 years now, one thing I've noticed is that the reaction is almost always negative at first, before people eventually come to love and accept a logo. What I wanted to do was go back in time to see if this was always the case. Some of these names that people love and can't imagine teams ever changing at this point, like the Philadelphia Flyers, the Pittsburgh Penguins, of that nature. At one point, when they came out, I wanted to see what the reaction was. Did people know at the time that this was going to be an iconic, legendary name? And what I found was that almost always people hated them. And almost every single one of these names that we consider iconic and untouchable now was just panned by the media, by fans. Fans always had alternate suggestions, which seemed like ridiculous options at this point. So it just goes to show you that it doesn't really matter what you name your team. People will hate it at first, but over a short amount of time, they will grow to love it, and they will grow to accept it as a part of their lives, so much so to the point where any suggestion to call the team otherwise is, almost blasphemous.
And you obviously worked on this book with Todd Radom as well, who's fantastic. He creating the world's most visible sports brands for 25-plus years. He throws in design, consultation, the illustration. He did the book Winning Ugly and now Fabric of the Game with you. What do you think you've learned from Todd, and what do you think he's learned from you?
I don't know if he's learned anything from me. I mean, Todd's been around so long in this industry that he really does feel like the Todd father. Like, that's what we call him. He just knows he knows so much in this industry. He's been so ingrained in it for so long. Like, he's actually been involved in the design of so many logos that people still love to this day. But what I've learned from him is basically how the process of these logos are designed, how it's more than just designing perhaps what the fans want. Like, it's a little more complicated than that. There's so many people that need to be made happy of, right? There's the ownership group, there's the front office, the players, as well as the fans. In addition to, like, the leagues, they need to be happy as well. And, he sort of, brought me down to earth a little bit more in terms of what I expected from teams. And Todd was great because he has done this before, right? He's written a book. This was my first book. This was Todd's second. We worked with the same publisher as Todd did first, so that helped.
Mm-hmm.
And Todd's been involved in the publishing industry before. Back in the 80s, he designed book covers. Most notably, he designed the typeface for Stephen King's Stranger Things. I think that's the name of it, or is it Needful Things? But I'm not a book, I'm not a fiction fan. But so yeah, Todd's great for that. He's good for just giving you some perspective and some guidance. And my plan going into this book was to make it like a 500-page behemoth full of photos. And he brought me back to reality a bit. He said, as great as that would be, no publisher is going to make that book, and it's going to cost $100, and it's just not realistic. So he sort of brought me back to reality and showed me, this is the best way to get a book done, that it can be published and that it can be sold and people will actually buy it.
Fabric of the Game, the stories behind the NHL's names, logos, and uniforms. Chris Creamer, our guest, of course, co-authored with Todd Radom, and you can get it all over major bookstores and online where books are sold. So the stories behind the NHL's names, logos, and uniforms, what are some of the craziest stories behind exactly that?
Well, there's some interesting origin stories in here, and I don't want to give away too much because, well, not to be selfish or anything, but I want some people to buy the book. But I was surprised at the Vancouver Canucks story. I had always heard that they simply just took the name of their minor league team, and that is true, but the sort of drama that surrounded that, it almost reminded me of Twitter now and social media outrage. The Canucks all started back in the 40s as a minor league team, and the name was actually suggested by a bootlegger who was friends of the owner of the team. And Canucks is named after Johnny Canuck, who's sort of Canada's version of Uncle Sam, like a cartoon sort of rallying war hero, and evolved into a comic book character. But the Canucks took that name, ran with it as a minor league team for 15 years, and when the NHL came calling, the owners of the Canucks minor league team, they got the NHL franchise, and they said, okay, new team, new era, new name. And the outrage that you saw on the front page of the Vancouver newspapers when they announced that, every single day, the local sports section would publish about 10 letters on the front page of their newspaper of people just so upset at this company saying, hey, we're not keeping the Canucks name.
Wow.
And like I said, Twitter of the day.
Yeah.
And it worked.
Yeah.
It worked. So they picked the Canucks name. The compromise was they got to pick the colors. The original minor league Canucks were red, white, and blue. And they went with blue and green for the Pacific Ocean and the forests of British Columbia, and the white as for the snow. And now, 50 years later, that's the Canucks color scheme to this day, even though they've sort of ventured off that path a few times. So I found that story interesting. Previous books that I've read that dig into team name origin stories, and even articles, directly on the, official websites, like NHL.com has done an article about team name origins, and it's simply they took this name from the minor league team. They took this name from a historical team. They didn't really get into the origins of the original name, which is what I was interested in. For example, like the Oakland Seals. They took the name Seals from a minor league team as well. But why did that minor league team pick the name Seals? So in our chapter on the Seals, we dive right into, okay, here's the history of the Seals name in the Bay Area. And it goes all the way back to the early 20th century, 60 years before the NHL team even exists. And, we wanted to find the true origins of all these names.
So, a lot of times in sports, and really, it's, I guess, everywhere, but in sports it's used too, the word brand comes up a lot, right? Like the Cowboys have the biggest brand in the NFL, the Yankee brand, the Laker brand. in hockey circles, maybe it's the Maple Leaf or Canadian brand. In Canada and certainly in the U.S., you could pick the popular regional market, Rangers, Bruins, etc. Original Six, it's almost become a brand now. Logo and brand, how do they go together? Because I gotta feel like if a team has a wonderful, wonderful logo, that it can enhance the brand immensely, right, Chris? I mean, how do they go together?
Well, a good name and a good logo that can ultimately win you more fans and make you more iconic than I'm going to say more than your market, perhaps. I don't want to say more than a successful team, because you do need some success in order for your brand to become iconic.
Yeah, you can't suck forever, even if you have a bad logo, or if you have a great logo, I should say. Yeah.
Well, Chicago Cubs to the exception, right? They seemed to do okay, even though they had a great logo, and they were still an iconic team for many years. But I was thinking of the New York Yankees and just how famous that cap is, even though they were just horrible in the 1980s.
Yeah.
And the early 90s, but they were running off of the history and the legacy of that from the great Yankee teams of the 20s right up to the 60s.
And Chris, adding to that real quick too, before you go on, I wanted to just quickly say something. There's a reason why Michael Kay usually before every game starts, like right at the beginning, if you're watching a 1:00 Yankee game, right at 101, 102. Here's the Yankees out in the field with the interlocking NY on the cap. There's a reason he says that.
Yeah, the Yankees logo is perhaps even more famous than the Yankees team itself, right? Like it's sort of gone off to another plane. And what was it? Was it Jay-Z that said he makes the Yankee cap more famous than a Yankee can? And that helps when you have that pop culture pushing the brand and just making it all the more iconic. The first time I went to Europe, I was in Italy, and I saw so many people wearing New York Yankee caps and shirts and jerseys, and not a lot of people are baseball fans out there in Italy, but my gosh, do they want to wear the Yankee cap just because of how powerful that logo is and what it represents, really. It represents a legacy, it represents championships, winning, power, and confidence, and all of that just from a simple logo.
So when you look at the logos in the NHL, do you have a top logo that exists now? I know some teams have monkeyed around and changed some things. I'm going to get into the reverse retro jerseys, by the way, in a minute, which I think are unbelievable for the most part. There's a couple of ones, but I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that maybe they don't have a great color scheme originally, or they don't have a great logo originally. When you have a great logo, you have great design, colors, etc. that go with it. You can do a lot more in terms of getting creative. But do you have, power rank, maybe like top 3, top 5, however you want to go there? It's awfully hard to go against that Blackhawk logo, right, Chris?
Oh yeah, Chicago Blackhawks. That's another classic logo, right? And it's going to be interesting to see where that falls in terms of eliminating the Native American imagery in sport. That one has always been sort of on the fence, right? Because it seems to be a more honorific depiction. So it'll be curious to see how that ends up over time. But that is a great looking logo. You can't deny that, and just how it's a logo that sits on a red jersey, and the logo itself has very, very little red in it. And that itself is interesting to me, and how it just sort of pops right off that jersey. So that's up there. Any of the original 6 teams, if we're talking uniforms, the Montreal Canadiens' home red uniform is just beautiful. Even as a Leafs fan, I can't deny, how awesome it is to see that uniform. And, you put that uniform up against the Red Wings white jersey, and to me, that is like the ultimate hockey uniform matchup. Just those 2 uniforms going head-to-head looks amazing to me. So I got to put the Habs up there. I got to put the Red Wings up there. Blackhawks as well. I know those are sort of predictable choices, but I'd lie to you if I didn't choose those ones. The Hartford Whalers is a big logo for me, and sadly gone now, except in the reverse retro program. But to me, that's the ultimate logo in that, you know, it shows you so much and does so much, but also with so little, right? Like it's a logo simple enough that a child could draw it from memory, but it also tells you so much about the team, so much about the brand, the identity, the name, how it's a W and a whale tail, and then and then an H hidden right in the middle of that, and that just makes it. Right?
You know, for years I didn't even see that. By the way,
it's such a light
wild
bulb moment when you see it. It's like, aha! Wow, this logo's 10 times better now as soon as you see that H.
Yeah, that logo is amazing. The reverse retros, though, are I think they're spectacular for the most part. I mean, the Avalanche coming out doing their thing with the Nordiques and the color scheme, you know, using the modern colors with old logos, and some are newer. It's just new. Some are old, new, old. I love the Wild with that old North Star color combo with the current logo. Clearly, you know, the Nordiques and Avs combo there. The Whalers with the Hurricanes. You know, the Statue of Liberty brought back by the Rangers. Not a big fan of the Sabres one, so not only do they stink this year really bad, but they've also put together a terrible reverse retro jersey. How about a comment or two on your favorites from the reverse retro? And color scheme seems to be a big way that these are standing out, does it not?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, some of them with the modern color scheme and the old designs, they really work. You know, you mentioned the Colorado Avalanche and the Quebec Nordiques. I think that is a great example of, it's almost, you know, we went through a darkening of colors in the 90s. So it's almost plausible that that's what the Nordiques may have looked like now, right? If they never moved, they'd take the original logo and then just darken the colors a little bit to give it a more modern look. And then in some cases it doesn't work. And an example of that to me is the Winnipeg Jets, where they take this classic, you know, 1970s uniform, they slap the old logo on there, but then they use the modern colors, which, you know, the old logo was red, white, and blue, and very bright, very vibrant, and all worked together. And now they take the modern colors of gray and navy blue, and it just sort of kills the look of that uniform. It's so dark and gloomy and depressing to see after such a bright, vibrant color scheme that I was a bit disappointed in that one. You mentioned the Wild and their North Stars. That's a fantastic one. And an example of a team that could pull that off full time in the future. You know, the green and gold is a color scheme that's not used in the NHL anymore, right? The Dallas Stars have gotten rid of it. The Oakland Seals are long gone. Minnesota, of any market, I feel, deserves to reclaim that color scheme. There doesn't seem to be a lot of attachment to the red and green of the Wild, so why not? You know, go for it. But the LA Kings, I think, really nailed it in this one, where they took two different eras. They took the logo of the 90s and they mixed it with the colors of the 70s and 80s to create the hybrid uniform that covers 30 years of their franchise's history, pays tribute to both Marcel Dion and Wayne Gretzky in a very well-designed, unique uniform that stands out amongst the entire league, right? Like, this team could own this look. Nobody else is going to be purple and gold. And the white version of that logo, the what we call like the Chevrolet logo, right on the chest, I think that's another one that looks fantastic. And you know, the Kings should consider making that their full-time look. It's a lot more interesting than black and silver, even though they won the Cup 2 times with it. I would seriously consider going purple and gold full-time.
Final one for you here, Chris. What do you hope, you know, when people get done, what do you hope people say about the book?
Well, I hope they enjoyed it. I hope they leave a 5-star review on Amazon. That'd be handy. I hope they leave the book having a greater appreciation for what goes into building a brand and naming a team and choosing a logo and choosing a uniform. For every single one of these teams in the league, and even the ones that don't exist anymore, at one point, choosing that name and the colors and the uniforms was the most important decision in the world for a group of people. and they agonized over it for months and months, and we don't really think about that now, right? We just see the team and we accept that that's what they look like without really appreciating what went into that design. All the people involved in it, especially the more modern teams, the more modern designs where focus groups are involved and huge meetings and boardrooms and the trademark and legal disputes that went into these things. The Nashville Predators, we cover this, how they wanted to name their team the Nashville Edge, and the logo that they wear now was designed to be with that name, the Edge, before Gary Bettman came in and said, nope, we can't call the team the Edge.
I'll tell you what, I love that logo, man.
Yeah, it's great.
It's so
and
sharp.
The story behind why that, like, this is a rare example of, it's probably the only example I could think of, where a team unveiled their logo before they even had a name.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Right, yeah, they said, here's our logo, now help us pick a name for it. And Predators wasn't even an option, if I recall correctly. It was like the Ice Tigers, it was Ice Tigers and Fury, and the ownership group, I guess, was like, you know what, none of these names are doing it for us, so they added Predators as a last option, and the fans loved it.
You know, you start to think about it, too. Like, I wonder if it's almost easier. I mean, it's not a regular thing that you see all the time, but you wonder if you go back in time, it'd be interesting to see if the logo did come first, and then you decided the name off of looking at the logo, you know? It kind of reversing it to see what the outcomes would have been, and frankly, for those people, if it was easier to come up with that.
Yeah, I mean, if you just give your designer a little bit of guidance and say, in the case of the Predators, it was their designer said, hey, I read this story about, finding this saber-toothed tiger fossil, so let's just do a logo about a saber-toothed tiger fossil. And when they said they wanted to call the team the Edge, he's like, okay, I'll make it a big, giant tooth in the front, and that'll be the edge of the team. I think, if you give your designer carte blanche, you'll be surprised with what you come up with. And, you get these options, you see various mascots and logos. It might make it easier to pick a name. You see the visual for it, and it's just easier to reuse the same word, visualize this brand as being alive and possible. Probably a lot better than just seeing a name written on a piece of paper with no colors and no logo or anything.
Well, the book is out. It's awesome, and Chris Creamer is a co-author along with Todd Radom. You got to go get it. Amazon.com, major bookstores, online, across the board where books are sold. It is called Fabric of the Game. The stories behind the NHL's names, logos, and uniforms. And you can get Chris on Twitter as well, at SportsLogos.net, and, of course, SportsLogos.net. Chris, thanks so much for a few minutes here. Congratulations on the book, and I'll have you back here. I can talk uniforms, logos, colors. I can talk this stuff all day, so continued success, man.
Thanks so much, Mike. I appreciate you having me here. Hope you're well.
Want to also mention, too, I talked off air with Chris about this, but if you go right now to fabricofthegamebook.com, that's fabricofthegamebook.com, you can get a signed copy by both authors, Todd Radom and Chris Creamer. So, again, that's another place to go by, fabricofthegamebook.com, and you can order, if you're in the United States, order in Canada, and signed copies are available. By the way, the forward is by Lanny McDonald. So this is a terrific, cool book. And, when you think about the best logos in the NHL, man, to narrow it down to, my top 3 or 5, I probably could. I got to say, I think the Blackhawks is probably number 1 for me. The modern, that headdress, it's so cool. Probably have to go Red Wings number 2. Heritage-wise, I understand the Bruins and Canadians. I don't know as if they're a favorite of mine. I got to tell you, I love the I'm a diehard Sabre fan, obviously. Boy, is it bad right now. Their logo's got to be up there, and they're my favorite team. I'm going to go Sabres 1. I'll be biased. I'm going to go Sabres 1, Blackhawks 2, Red Wings 3. And I got to tell you, I've always loved the Pittsburgh Penguins logo. I just think it's so cool that Penguin, skating basically as a hockey player. I don't know if people know this about Pittsburgh too, but they're the only non-original 6 team in the top 5 of most lists out there, which is wild. They've won 5 cups now in this great era with Crosby, Malkin, and company. And you know what? The gold and black color scheme, a lot better than brown, gold, black, right? That they had before. Robo Penguin. I don't know. I love it. So I'd go Sabres 1, Blackhawks 2, Red Wings 3. Go Penguins 4. And then, man, that 5th spot. I'll tell you what. I think I would go. I think I would go with the Ranger Statue of Liberty logo. I think is my 5th. I really love that one. And just outside, don't fall into my top 10. I'd probably throw Canadians in there, Bruins, without ranking them. Canadians, Bruins, for sure. Predators, absolutely. I think Vegas's logo is great too. There's just so many awesome logos. The Blues, I've liked the Blues logo for a long time, as well. I mean, you've got that mix, the 80s, 90s, adding the red to the logo here and there. The Brett Hull years, the Gretzky years, the music note part of it with St. Louis Blues. The nickname coinciding. I think Seattle Kraken's got a great new logo coming up in expansion. I've always liked Edmonton's as well, but those are some of my favorites in the top 5 for sure, in top 10 rounding out in no particular order as well. Mike Lindsley with you. It's the ML Sports Platter all over the major platforms like Spotify, Google, Apple, you name it. Download, subscribe, leave feedback, and a 5-star review. A big tip of the cap thank you to Stanley Law Offices, Barks and Rec Doggy Daycare, and Hides of Liverpool. If you are in and around the Central New York area all March long, use the code MLSP. That's ML Sports Platter, MLSP. At the register, you'll get 10% off your order with Hides of Liverpool. Hit me on Twitter at Mike L Sports, all a part of the Brawl Network, at Network Brawl on Twitter. As I always tell you, enjoy the games.